Even the simplest of games can become quite complex, the more that each player tries to deceive or trick their opponents. And this is especially true if those players can utilize magic. In particular, if that magic is being wielded by players who are members of the most skilled race on a disboard that can utilize magic. That of the Elves. Not the most powerful race on disboard, as they are rank 7, but the most skilled at wielding it, their specialty being able to weave multiple rites at the exact same time. And with multiple spells at play, well, you can see how the complexity of any game would be increased by this. And there is a very simple game that is featured in the prologue of Volume 5 of the light novel that is made quite complex just by the sheer fact that both players are utilizing magic. And this game, although completely insignificant, to the point that it's not even given an official name in the light novel, so I choose to refer to it as Blind Card, is a game that I think foreshadows what is to come with any game that involves members of the elf race in the future. This gives us an idea of what to look out for, the kind of deception that we will likely see, and, well, the scale of what Sora and Shiro are eventually going to have to overcome when they eventually and inevitably end up facing Exceed Rank 7, Elf. So what game is it exactly that is featured in the prologue of Volume 5? Well, the game that I'm calling Blind Card is, as I mentioned, extremely simple. 3 cards are taken from a standard playing card deck. The Ace, King, and Queen of Spades. Just those 3 individual cards. They are laid face down on the table, shuffled, and each player blindly selects a card. Ace beats King, King beats Queen, and Queen beats Ace. Essentially, it's just rock, paper, scissors. Except there is only one of each option, and you have to blindly select what that option is. Since there is only one option, that means there is no possibility of a draw. One player will win, one player will lose. And thus, by the covenants, someone will always win. Unless, of course, both players are caught cheating, then it would either both players would result in a loss, or the game would be considered null and void. That doesn't exactly happen here, and that's not exactly the point. But for as simple as this game is on its surface, it becomes quite complex when both of the players of the game are using magic to try to get one over on their opponent. So, to set the stage for this game, it is a game played between Feel Nirvalin and the butler of another noble in Elven society. The butler's name is Fritz. The entire scenario is that Feel and Clammy have approached this noble and his butler because the noble and butler are at the center of a drug smuggling ring, and Feel and Clammy are using that to their advantage to get leverage, and through this game and their eventual victory, spoilers, Feel does end up winning this game, as well as Clammy, who wins her game against the noble, who's named Barthel, which I covered in its own video that I will link up above. They're using this game to eventually take over the territory and work their way into Elven society in the effort to take down Elven society. But if you want full context on all of that, I will also link my analysis of the Volume 5 prologue up above as well. So the game is being played between Feel and Fritz. But Feel, before the game even began, had used magic to mask her own appearance, making herself look like Clammy, and then was using another rite on top of that to hide the fact that she was using magic at all. So Fritz, when they first encounter each other, thinks that he is being approached by an Amanity. And immediately, with his arrogance, he's looking down on his opponent. He thinks that there is no possible way that he can lose. Which, of course, is a very fatal mistake in any game that you play, especially one against people as cunning as Feel and Clammy, those who are aspiring to surpass Sora and Shiro. But nonetheless, Fritz isn't a complete idiot in this. Now, Feel does goad Fritz into the game, forcing him to challenge her, giving Feel the right to choose what game is played. And so she chooses the simple game that I'm calling Blind Card. She picks 3 cards from the deck, lays them face down, and explains the game to Fritz. The wager that they are both putting on the table for this, under the covenants, is that Fritz demands the destruction and abolishment of all evidence that Feel and Clammy have of the drug smuggling, whereas Feel demands Fritz's confession about everything. leaving it very vague, intending him to confess everything about the drug smuggling, as well as Fritz is also cheating in the other game that's being played between the Noble and Clammy of Oracle Card, so she wants his entire confession about all of it. Granted, given the vagueness of that, just, I want you to confess everything, all of it, understand? You think that would end up with him, singing like a canary and saying his entire life story? But of course, I'm sure Fritz's life story could fill a novel in and of itself, so we just get the cliff notes. He's gonna confess the drug smuggling and the things relevant to this overall story. Getting back on track though, they both swear Ashente by the Covenants, Feel shuffles the cards, and then they both draw their card face down in front of them. Throughout this game, we are actually seeing Fritz's perspective. We see his inner monologue, what he's actually thinking, and how he's analyzing this game. He specifically says that he was not able to determine what card he drew before the game began. It wasn't until he had the card in front of him that he was able to use magic to tell that he had the ace. And again, this reinforces why I'm calling it blind card, because Fritz, even while using magic, could not tell. Now there is a little bit that's unclear about this game. When Feel shuffled the cards, did she lay all three out on the table, or were they in a stack and then they each drew their card? Because either way, whoever draws first kind of has control as to who draws what, especially if the person drawing first was Feel, who also shuffled the cards. And this is something that Fritz took into account. He realized that Feel shuffled the cards, and thus she probably controlled who drew what. Therefore, Fritz knew, since he had the ace, that his opponent must have drawn the queen, because that's the card that would beat his. Of course, if you are going to be the one shuffling it, there's only 3 cards present. It's very easy with 3 cards to know exactly where the position of each of them is. And so, even Fritz thinking that his opponent is an Amanity, of course she was cheating. There was no way that she wouldn't cheat, because leaving it up to random chance, she wouldn't do that. She thinks herself a cunning Amanity after all. Fritz is still arrogant, but he still does his due diligence. He actively checks to see if magic is being used in this game. And in the light novel, it explicitly says he is certain that there is not magic being used. And then he uses magic to check what his opponent's card is. And it's actually the king. That is what his magic shows him. So Fritz realizes that his opponent must have thought that Fritz would know she'd draw the winning card. Okay? That sounds like a mouthful, but essentially, Fritz realized his opponent would draw the king, thinking that Fritz would swap them immediately. Because if his opponent did draw the winning card, and Fritz swapped them, then Fritz would just automatically win. So his opponent accounted for that. So if Fritz did swap them, now he would lose. But since he's already in the winning position, he has the ace, his opponent has the king, all he has to do is nothing and then he would win. And so that's exactly what he does. He declares open deal, flips over his card, the ace, just as he saw, but when his opponent flips over her card, it is in fact the queen. Fritz jumps out of his chair, he's shocked, he has no idea how this is possible, and then the illusion in front of him fades. The person who he thought was Clammy turns out to be Feel, and he realizes that he's been completely had. Feel, throughout this game, has been using multiple rights. She is in fact a hexcaster, far and away probably one of, if not the most skilled elves currently in Elvengard. Not the most skilled to ever exist, that's something we'll get to in the Great War, but right now, as a hexcaster, Feel is probably in the realm of myth and legend, because it is described in the light novel that duo casting, that is, the ability to cast 2 spells at the exact same time, is the specialty of elves. Fritz is a duo caster. He is the average among the elves, able to hold 2 rights at the exact same time, nothing to scoff at. Tricasters are considered gifted. They are strong elves, and the best of the best are quadcasters, able to wield 4 rights at the same time. Hexcaster, like Feel, is far above the best of the best. Like, that's essentially unheard of. So Fritz never stood a chance from the very beginning. But there are a few very interesting things that can be revealed by this simple game. Not only the deception that is being used, but the way the deception is being used. For starters, Feel went into this game masking her presence as someone else, which just simply shows that when challenging someone to a game, when participating in a game under the Covenants, you don't even have to know if your opponent is actually who you think it is. Magic could be used to disguise yourself, your allies, everyone else, and as long as your opponent doesn't know and doesn't catch on, even if they did catch on, it's probably not considered cheating under the Covenants as long as it doesn't directly affect the game. And that is a very scary tactic to use, especially when it's someone like Feel, who is a Hexcaster. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, she not only used a right to mask her own presence, but she used another right to mask the fact that she was using magic at all. And presumably, that extends to the entire game and any magic that she would use. Maybe. We don't exactly have a clear-cut description of this. The fact is, in the prologue of the light novel, Feel is revealed to be a Hexcaster because she used at least 6 rights at the exact same time. But I'm kind of thinking she's more than a Hexcaster, because the rights that she was using was to mask her own presence and then hide that fact. She was also, at the exact same time, masking Clammy's presence as Feel's. So Clammy looked like Feel looked like Clammy, and she was using another right to mask the fact that she was doing that on Clammy. So she had to use 2 masking rights to mask 2 other rights. If that is the case, then when she used magic in the game against Fritz, she'd likely also have to use a right to cover that up. But the actual 6th right that she was using was to defend for Clammy in the game that she was playing against Barthel the Noble, because that game was magical and you had to use magic openly to defend yourself. So by these 6 rights that she was using, there was only 2 rights that were masking the actual change of appearance of each of Clammy and Feel. But there wasn't one to mask what Feel was doing in the game against Fritz. And yet in the light novel, it was explicitly stated by Fritz that he was certain that magic was not being used. And yet, at the end of the game, after Feel had won, she told Fritz that he should really take a close look at his opponent before starting a game, implying that there was a way for Fritz to see through Feel's deception. So, some stuff is a little unclear here. When Fritz was certain that magic wasn't being used, was that just with the cards that were on the table? Did he not think to look at his opponent and assume if she was using magic? If he didn't look that closely at his opponent, then that would make sense. But Feel was using magic on the cards. Was Fritz not looking the entire time? Or was Feel's right that masked magic being used on her person extending to the cards in front of her? Or perhaps she's just more than a Hexcaster and was able to use a 7th spell to mask the fact that she was using magic to alter the face of her card in the game when Fritz looked at it. Because when Fritz looked at it, it appeared as the king, but it was actually the queen. Either that, or what Feel had done was swap the face of the queen, and the king that was off to the side, the 3rd card that was not selected, swapped it, Fritz looked at it, saw that it was the king, and then Feel just simply swapped it back before revealing her card. There's a few different ways that she could have gone about this, where magic might not have been used at the exact moment when Fritz was checking for it. Still, the number of possibilities that do exist imply that games can become so complex with the ability to use magic. Especially in Feel's case, being able to cast at least 6 rights at the same time, she's a terrifying opponent to go up against, especially with her cunning nature and her ruthlessness, mostly geared towards Elven society as a whole, but still, she's probably the most terrifying person on Discord, in my opinion, as of right now, because of the abilities that she has. She's able to use magic freely, and then just cover it up because she can use so many rights at the exact same time. But here's the thing. If it takes 1 right to do something, and then another right to cover it up, and Elves' specialty is duo casting, any of the Elven race, just an average elf, can do this. they can cast spells and make it so that it cannot be noticed by other races. Now, again, I point back to what Fiel had said, that Fritz really should have taken a closer look at his opponent. So there must be a way to see through that deception, but you have to actually be looking for it. And that in and of itself draws into question how exactly the higher races are able to see spirits. We know at the very least that Exceed rank 12 and above, that being Dampier, can see spirits. So when a rite is being woven, they can see how many spirits are being used and see the flow of spirits. That's why Oracle Card, the game that Clammy and Barthel were playing, is a game that is thought to be one that players cannot cheat in, because if both players can see spirits, then they can see the flow of the rite. But if a player can cover up the fact that they're using magic, then they'd probably be able to cover up the fact that that rite is being interfered with as well, so it may not be as solid of a game as they think it is, especially if a hexcaster is involved. But still, I'm curious how the higher races actually see spirits, whether it's a constant thing or whether it's something that they have to focus on and actively have to try to detect the spirits. That would make more sense, because if spirits are constantly flowing around everything, then that could, I'd imagine that would blur people's vision as well. They'd have to, try to focus past the spirits rather than the alternative, which I think it actually is where they'd have to focus to be able to see the spirits. Regardless, getting back on topic, I do believe that any duocaster can cast a spell and then be able to cover it up with magic. There's a possibility that it could be seen through if someone is focusing and looking for it, but here's the thing. The Council of Elven Society, the decision-making group that is likely the acting agent plenipotentiary of Elven Society, is likely going to contain members that are at minimum tricasters, if not all of them being quadcasters, the best of the best. The highest of Elven Society, as arrogant as they are, they're probably all going to be nobles, which there is a lot expected of nobles, as seen by people looking down on Fiel, because that's also another thing that she's doing. She's one of the most gifted elves in current history. And yet, everyone assumes that she is the shame of the noble house of Nirvalin because she's lying to everyone, and everyone thinks that she is barely able to cast 2 spells at the same time, having to use boosting tattoos. So Fiel has been living her whole life in deception to get people to underestimate her so that she can eventually take down Elven Society. She's just absolutely terrifying. So with deception like that, she's able to use magic freely because no one will think that she's able to use magic. And that kind of deception is the most terrifying, when you are certain that your opponent cannot do something and then they are able to. When it comes to magic in games, it is just going to be such a battle of deception, such a test of willpower, and, well, how much can Sora and Shiro read into, and really, how much can Sora bluff his way to victory by making them think that he knows exactly what they're doing, what rights that they're imploring, because although he has Jabril at his side, Jabril is extremely powerful, but she's not, the most skilled at the finer things. Elves are the ones that are the most skilled at weaving rites. And perhaps that is the reason why Fritz couldn't see what Fiel was actually doing. It would make sense that everyone who can cast the same rites is not made equal. That with better practice, with better ability to wield magic, one can weave a rite better than others. And that is likely the case with Fiel, that she's just that skilled, she was able to weave a rite that Fritz was not able to easily detect in his half-hearted searching for magic. Even though he was certain of it, his perception was just not strong enough to detect Fiel's magic. Perhaps. Hopefully this video all made sense. There is a lot going on in just this simple game, a lot to read into with the fact that magic is being used, and as I mentioned, that's only going to be compounded so much further when we actually get to confronting Elven Society. The Council and all of the elves that are going to be involved in those games are probably going to be tricasters, quadcasters. They're going to have so many rights that they can employ to deceive their opponents before the game could even begin, and it might not even count as cheating in the game, even if they are caught. because Feel was masking her presence during the game. She appeared as someone else. That doesn't interfere with the game in and of itself. So even if Fritz called her out for doing that, it's not cheating, because the game was the cards in front of them. Her changing her appearance does nothing to affect that outcome. Even though, by masking her appearance, that caused her opponents to underestimate her and not think that she could freely use magic, and that allowed her to do just that. Magic is a terrifying thing in Discord, a terrifying thing in games, and I really look forward to how this is going to develop in the future of No Game, No Life. So let me know down in the comments below what you think of this simple game that I call Blind Card. How do you think magic is going to be implemented in the future, and what deception do you think we are going to see from the elves as we get to confronting them throughout Sora and Shiro's conquest of Discord? I really look forward to hearing your thoughts. And make sure to subscribe to the Daily Flugel if you want to see more like it. And if you want to talk to me live, I also stream on Twitch a couple times a week, and I would love to see you there. But with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Ashente.